friends. Welcome to Plática with Adelita, where we talk about issues that our community is facing here in Pima County and how we can work together to ensure we overcome challenges together. Today's Plática is very special for the Pima County District 5 team and our planning committee. Tonight, we will be revealing our very hard one, like this crafted strategic plan. And before we get started, we want to encourage those of you joining us tonight to please send any questions you might have in the comments, and we'll do our best to respond either live this evening or in the comment section. Since the campaign, when we first started this process, it was vital to me that the District 5 office work with the community to recover and prosper together. Historically, District 5 has had strong leaders like David Yetman, Congressman Raul Grijalva, my favorite congressman, my dad, Richard Elias, and Betty Villegas. We wanted to honor their legacies and started working to create a blueprint for what our office would accomplish with the community. Past District 5 leaders taught us that we are first and foremost public servants who cannot and should not do this alone. The role of our community isn't to be at the will of its leadership, but integral to the decisions and service we provide to everyone living in Pima County. In January of this year, literally right after we moved into the District 5 offices, we began drafting a mission and vision statement. We identified about 40 community leaders to work with us in the formulation of a plan. We had amazing people join us with expertise spanning labor, housing, environment, education, community organizing, business, and more. Because of the urgent need to respond to pandemic recovery, everything from ensuring that people could be tested for COVID-19, vaccinated against COVID-19, targeting resources to our most vulnerable communities, we didn't get together until June of 2021. And this is a lovely picture of the people that joined us. Since then, we held 4 meetings in total with working groups to first help us identify our main priorities. We had a long list of priorities, and we had to narrow those down. We had to create SMART goals, which are scientific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely goals. And lastly, commit to working together to accomplish our shared vision. This was a rewarding but very challenging project. We had a hard time narrowing down the goals, setting realistic timeframes, and balancing the urgent needs that seemed to arise daily. Together, we did it, and I'm very proud to share this work with you. Before we get into details, we welcome you to visit our website, adelitaesgrijalva.com, and sign up for our communications and look at the complete copy of this strategic plan. So here we go. Here is the vision statement that we worked on together. We are District 5, a comunidad that strives to provide enduring opportunities to lead diverse, safe, and productive lives through equitable access to education, housing, and a healthy environment. We will reach our shared vision, and then the mission statement is, we will reach our shared vision of a healthy, thriving community by honoring and preserving our history and environment and maintaining a vision of hope for future generations. We will collaborate with neighborhoods and essential partners to create systemic change and advance shared policy goals. Somos District 5. The driving values of this strategic plan the District 5 plan has been crafted with a pro-equity lens aimed to defend, work with, and empower the D5 community, especially its most underserved residents. Our priorities are education, environment and climate resilience, healthy and safe communities, and housing that people can afford. Integral to District 5's strategic plan, while not always specifically stated, is the recognition that historical and ongoing systemic discrimination disproportionately impacts working and poor families, women, children, the elderly, Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants and refugees, undocumented and mixed status families, people without homes, the LGBTQA+ community, the differently abled, and other communities. These acknowledgements have guided our document and the priorities contained within. So as I mentioned, our plan's 4 priorities are education, environment and climate resilience, healthy and safe communities, and housing people can afford. Here today to help us share about each priority, we have some of the amazing D5 strategic planning leaders to go over the working group goals. First, I want to thank you all for taking time out on a Thursday evening. I know how busy your schedules are, and thank you for joining us. I want to give you all the space to introduce yourselves and let everyone know which committee you were on the planning process for. And so I'll go ahead and start with, closest to me is Christina McVie. Christina.
Thank you, Adelita. So my name's Christina McVie, and I'm a Tucsonan. I moved here when I was 3 months old. The committee that I worked on is the Environment and Climate Resiliency. I have had a number of careers, but my most recent career in the last 25 years or so has been working on environmental issues. I'm the president of the board of the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, and I'm also the president of the Community Water Coalition of Southern Arizona. And I've served on the board of the Audubon Society, Tucson Audubon Society, and as their conservation director for a number of years. So it's an issue that's very near and dear to my heart.
And what priority group were you a part of in the strategic planning process?
In the Environment and Climate Resiliency, it was a really interesting group of individuals. And it was a remarkably cohesive group. I think our greatest challenge, Adelita, was trying to rein in our fantasies and be practical and realistic. That was hard to be science-driven the way that you wanted us to have measurable outcomes and try to stage that. But it was a good challenge.
That was my hardest challenge too, just so you know. It was very difficult. Well, thank you, Christina, for being here. And I'm going to, next is Trish Muir. Oh, you're. I know.
My apologies. Thank you so much, Supervisor Grijalva. I'm the habit of muting all of the time in these meetings. My name is Trish Muir. I am the chair of the Pima Area Labor Federation. We're part of the AFL-CIO. My committee was the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee, something near and dear to my heart, very labor-centric, but also very family-oriented. My family has been in Tucson for 5 generations, so very invested in our community, and I'm thrilled to be here. We had similar challenges in our committee, in that there were so many things we could do. So many goals we could set, so many aspirations. We had an incredible group of people who came together who were just excited and ready to come up with new ideas and find ways that we could elevate our community as it relates to health and safety. So narrowing it down, having measurable goals, setting timelines, those were challenges, but we had a fantastic group and they really just rose to the occasion.
Thank you. And thanks again for being here. Charlene.
Hi, I'm Charlene Mendoza and very happy to be here tonight. So thank you to Supervisor Grijalva and the District 5 team. I was born and raised in Tucson. I'm raising my own kids here. Love our community and was very grateful to be a part of this. I worked in the education I don't know, I felt like it was kind of a task force in a way, but we worked on the education goals. And I guess what I would say is that, as a longtime educator myself, as well as somebody who has had kids in a whole variety of types of schools here in Tucson, working as the chair of Las Adelitas, local organizing group, and working now in city government, I think it gives us a unique opportunity to really understand all of the different places that education impacts our community. So I think in our particular group, the challenges we're really trying to think about the needs of education in our community from 0 to college and beyond. And not just traditional public school, but also vocational education and opportunities for adults coming back into the workforce. So I think, again, as as Trish and Christina have already said, when everything is possible, it's really exciting. So we're excited to talk about education in Tucson as we go through this conversation.
Yep. Me too. Betty.
There I am. Hi, everyone. I'm Betty Villegas, and I am the, what's my title nowadays? Executive Director of the South Tucson Housing Authority. I've been here since January, and I was on the Housing That People Can Afford Committee, and it was, first of all, I want to thank Adelita for even having this this strategic plan, providing District 5 the opportunity to participate with all these important, all of these. All of us, I think, are important to our community. The education, the health, the environment, and then there's housing. And as a housing advocate all my life, District 5 has always been a leader in all of these areas, right? But the supervisor for District 5 has always been a champion for housing. And I was really glad that Adelita included this portion, as it is important. And I look at housing as being the foundation for all the others, right? I mean, you have to have safe housing to have healthy housing. You have to have safe and healthy housing to educate your kids, to provide stability, the environment. Everything is really based on that foundation of having a home, having a place to call home. And so it was really important that that we discuss the issues that are so important to our community right now. And of course, as we know, housing is one of the items at the top of the list. So it was exciting. I think that you had a good group of people, and I believe that the goals that you've set are reachable, and I look forward to discussing them.
Yeah, me too. What I thought was really interesting is we were going through some of the goals from each committee. There's so many of them that we could put under other categories because they were all so similar. It was different outreach, but it was like outreach on housing, making sure that people have access to that information. And then same with education initiatives. It's like, how do we know that they have information? There was a whole piece on curriculum regarding sustainability and our environment. I mean, it was fascinating to me how many of the committees really wanted us to work on a lot with young people. That was I saw that really clear. So here is a nice graphic of the different committees that we have with education, healthy and safe, housing people can afford, and environment. And so I'm wondering if each of you, if you have to speak to your first impressions of what this strategic planning process was like, and what was your experience working in the committee? Some of you have touched a little bit on that already. And anyone can answer. It's a chat.
In for a moment. In the education committee, it was great because we had a combination of people who are educators at different levels and also folks who are working in other educational settings and students. So one of the things that was really great and also somewhat of a challenge was really having people feel comfortable, be so open and vulnerable very quickly. Yeah. Because although we knew each other in some ways, for some people, in other cases, that wasn't true. And I think especially for the young folks that were involved, it took a lot to be able to speak to their experiences in this particular audience. So one of the parts of the process that was very valuable for me was really over the course of the meeting, seeing people really find their voice and being able to share it openly and honestly.
Yep. And so since we have the education slide up, what was one goal that made you excited or hopeful for what this process could bring?
For me, it really is to cultivate equitable access to educational opportunities, because one of the things that became very clear is we could have the best education, anything, curriculum, materials, facilities, but if we don't have people who can engage with it and have access to it, it kind of doesn't matter what else is out there. So for me, that's something I find so exciting and really helps me be hopeful about the work, because I think we're in a unique opportunity, and particularly with your background in education, as a board member and now a supervisor, it's just such a great time to prioritize this cornerstone of our community.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's been really interesting how much both of these elected offices dovetail, but it's also, if you're a good advocate for to advocate for your own children, for your neighbors' kids, for your grandkids, for, our community in general, there's so many of these that just really spoke to me on what what the potential is, but also coordinating it, because this is not, an education office, but for us to be able to work together with schools and in a partnership with the county and with the city, I think, and other nonprofits and community members, I'm really excited about the potential.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that was something that came out of our group as well, and I'm sure for others also, is how much of this is dependent on communication and collaboration.
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
I agree. I'll jump in to say that there are so many overlaps for one, and I was inspired by the people that were on our committee. We really got to share information about how we feel about housing, and what is going on out there. So we learned from each other, and we learned that we have to get out of our silos and be able to really negotiate. And we know what's needed, but how to get there is it really takes collaboration, and it takes building relationships, and it really takes everyone working together. So that's one of the things that I really appreciated. I learned things from people that were in my group. You think you know it all, but then you're always learning more. And there's always new things on the horizon that you when you're working and you find yourself in this silo, you forget that there's so many other things happening. So that was a really exciting thing for me. I got to learn about many things that are going on out there. And so I think for me, one of the exciting things is really how D5 is committing to working with the city of Tucson and with the city of South Tucson and all the jurisdictions really, but mostly for D5. There's housing is, there's pockets of housing that are in the same levels of income, the same uses of housing that are in the city, and then a block over is the county. So you can't really isolate yourself from there. The fact that D5 is such an urban district, I think it's important that that they work together, that you work together, because if you really want to make equitable decisions, you have to look at for the county as an example. The city of Tucson gets a lot more money than the county does for affordable housing. But, the county still has to participate in that process and still has to contribute in areas that are really, that really are the poor areas, the areas of poverty, in order for it to be equitable. So I think for you all to work together and for you to understand the importance of working together is going to bring more opportunity to the people that really need it in our community.
Yeah, one of the things that I want you to speak on real quick, Betty, is the title of this, the goal, because this was something that I hadn't thought of, because you think of affordable housing. And so
Yeah.
can you speak a little to why this title is so important and it's not just affordable housing?
Right, because you think about mixed income, right? That we have an array of income levels in our community, and District 5 is definitely one that you have the high income to the low income people in your community. So regardless of where people live, they need to be able to afford where they live. So if they're a working class family that can afford, more than the low income family, we all need to live in housing that we can afford. Unfortunately, our society has created this type of environment because we all know that housing is a basic need in our community regardless. And so it's important, people have this really stigma against affordable housing. Immediately they think, oh, that's public housing. That's those people over there, and it shouldn't be that way, because we all should be able to afford where we live, regardless of income. And that's why trying to get away from the word affordable housing is important, because it's really about housing that everyone can afford, regardless of their income.
Yep, I agree. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because initially it did say affordable housing. Thank you. Alfred Urbina says, thank you for the great concept of being inclusive and having a document created in conjunction with the community in District 5. Thank you, Alfred. Alfred and I graduated from Pueblo together, so we've been friends for a while. Yeah. And so, Chris, I'm sorry, Trish, do you want to speak next? Because I think Elvira's ready with our slide.
Sure thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
So, for our committee, the contributing members.
And you had a big committee. Look at those names.
We had a really big committee, right? There was a lot of people, and everyone had a different definition of what a healthy and safe community looked like, right? Because the lens of their perspective or their approach, right, and their experience has been different, or things that are of concern in different communities. So it was a really, in the first meeting was a little slower, sort of like Charlene talked about, where some people knew each other, some people didn't, is what I'm saying going to be heard. And it was really one of the fantastic things about this process was, and I applaud everyone at D5 for making sure that this was a space where all voices could be heard, right? And that that everyone, whatever their perspective was that they brought, that was valued. And that was your selection of contributing members and facilitators, and the way that everything came together was really incredible. So I really applaud D5 for that. And then as we looked at things, right, we talked about advocating for equity and access, because if we don't do that, we leave people out, we leave people behind, right? And so if we want our community to be healthy and safe as a whole, that means making sure that access and that equity is there. And the intersectionality of all of these different be it education, housing, environment, they intersect in so many ways. So that equity and access piece, defending workers' rights, something that we strive to do daily in our organization, but is a challenge in Arizona. We don't live in a state that is friendly to workers, or that has a history or a track record of defending the working people of our state. And so having a good economic foundation for our families, people having good jobs, being able to earn money, provide stability, having access to healthcare, all of those things. Again, being able to afford a home, being able to establish that stability for a child to go to school. All of those things come together. And responding and recovering from COVID-19. Again, right, we're in the middle of this pandemic. We have seen our community hit really hard, and some people more so than others, right? Coming back to that equity and access, where not everyone is some people are suffering more than others, and some folks have access to things that other folks don't have. Some people are essential workers and had to go to work all through the hardest time of that pandemic, right? So, and again, that's where I have to say kudos to the Pima County Health Department, because they have been doing a fantastic job of making sure that that there was access for testing, that there's vaccines available, and so that component of it, and continuing on that response and recovery, because we're not out of the woods yet.
Right.
And our criminal justice reform, I think we could all talk about that for a long time.
For hours. I know.
Right?
Hours. Yes.
Yes.
And I was so glad to see that be a piece of creating a healthy and safe community, because I think it is so critical. We talk about it all the time, but it's, people have to feel safe and protected. And that's not the case for a lot of our community members.
Right. And especially as we see, not just saying that these conditions exist, or that we have criminal justice issues, but also as we see our youth or people who may have a brush with the system, how do we create opportunity? How do we keep all of those people healthy and safe, right? And in because they're our community too. So looking at that, and then supporting safe homes and relationships. And there was a lot of talk initially about gun violence and access to firearms, but really looking at the domestic situations and sometimes the instability that can occur, right, or the strife that can occur when people don't have access to a good job, right, and a steady income to be able to provide for the family. All of the stressors and things that maybe, housing instability, all of those things that can create and contribute to unsafe domestic situations. And so we were just, like I said, it was a really big committee, and everybody had so many fantastic ideas of ways we could all come together to help Tucson and Pima County be a safer and healthier place for all of us to thrive. So
yeah, and I want to give kudos to Betty, because while she was here, Supervisor Villegas had a committee working specifically with District 2 and District 5 in targeting resources to these same neighborhoods that are historically overlooked. And so the Pima County Health Department was already looking at that. Having discrimination is a health issue. And so that was something that was very critical, and the foundation was there. So it made it the transition for me was like, this is an issue. We have to look at it because you already voted on it. This is a priority for the county. So thank you, Betty, for doing that really hard work, because I know people weren't talking about that before, and now everyone is talking about it, especially here in Pima County. And we've seen how the resources that the Pima County Health Department have been targeted specifically. And so we've just continued and carried that mantle that you started. So I want to thank you very much for that. And the partnerships that we had with the University of Arizona and with the city of Tucson. I mean, we worked together with the federal government. We worked together to get as many people in our community vaccinated. And I think that is what speaks to me so much with this strategic plan, is that none of this is just this office, because the people here are not going to be able to do it. We have to do it together, and we have to bring other people in. And so much of this is like, how are you working with schools? How are you working with the city? How are you working with nonprofits? How are you working with the merge under different, I mean, there's so many different pieces of this that it's absolutely not in a vacuum. We're not doing it by ourselves. Christina, did you want to talk about?
Well, you've covered so much, but I really want to stress a few things. And from the standpoint of environment and climate resilience, my background is actually in medicine. I'm a retired registered nurse specializing in emergency and critical care. So when we talk about overlap, there's a lot of it through all these different topics. But the basic function of a healthy environment, that we depend on that for our lives, literally our lives. So it's not something out there, pretty picture that you're looking at like the mountains around Tucson. It's something that happens to us every day in the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, in our sense of place, what makes Tucson so incredibly special, and the things that we've already done in our community, like the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. But more importantly, as we look at where we are, we have to look at where we're going. And with climate change happening so rapidly, our ability to survive in this environment is in question. And in particular, it is in question for communities that are marginalized. It is more so for the vulnerable. And so I want to get back in particular to the equity and access issue. We know, for instance, that young people having access to a natural environment outside, playing outside, that this is tremendously important for their development and their health. But they can't do that in the middle of an extreme heat wave. They need to have a place where they can have shade. They need to have a place where it's going to be safe for them. The same is true with our water. We have PFAS, we have 1,4-dioxane, we have various different histories of a history of TCE in our community. And I lived on the South Side during the TCE issue. I worked at Keno at the time and treated patients who had been exposed to TCE and who developed cancer. Your willingness to work with the federal government, to work with all of the stakeholders is critical to our community coming together and solving some of these issues. The county's done a great job to date in looking at climate resilience from the standpoint of the county buildings and county staff. But we as a community need to look at cooling centers. We need to look at opportunities in particular for marginalized communities to be involved. And our group was so great. We had a retired physician. We had a professional nonprofit executive director. We had a former National Park Service person. We had a neighborhood activist who was very closely involved with TCE and has been for years, and an educator. So our group, though small, came from so many different perspectives that it was a very rich environment for us to begin to look at the sorts of things that our community could do for ourselves and in conjunction with others to expand on the needs that our community right now has for their survival. So that to me was just incredibly exciting. And then of course, focusing also on youth, reaching out to the community. I really encourage people to contact Supervisor Grijalva's website, send in your contact information, get involved. It's that easy. Tell someone that you want to work on something that interests you, whatever that might be. There's probably a place for you either within the community or within this effort where your input is valuable and you may have insights that we don't know about. This is remarkable that Supervisor Grijalva has actually done this. I would like to see everyone do this kind of strategic plan so that as a community, all the elected officials could become closer to their constituents and to constituent service, which is really what it's all about, and developing this sort of a community vision. We did this for the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. We can certainly do it for all of these other issues. So So I'm just very grateful to have been a part of it. I thank you so much.
Well, I'm so glad you were here because I know we had a long talk because I said, so would you serve as like, a chair, a leader? And you're like, yes, I will do that. And so
Well,
really
if I'm not mistaken, I told you that I would talk less if I was facilitating. So that was a good idea.
that was not what I was planning. You suggested that. I actually appreciate your input and enjoy your stories. It was great. So what other than, Christina just already touched on this, but what's any piece of advice you would give to people in the community who want to get involved in making a change in their community? Because all of you have been able to do that in the different roles that you have. And as part of the strategic plan, I hope that we'll have a lot of people. We have so many initiatives that are part of this. And actually, I do want to answer a question that came up from Steph Anderson. She said, if we have a strategic plan, is there an action plan to implement the priorities? And there is. We do have one, Steph. We actually have broken it down by tasks, by the month that it's due. A lot of them are coming up between this year and next year. We have a lot through December of 2022, but all of that information is also on our website where we break down, and then our staff is going to be keeping track of all of the things that we do as part of an initiative. We're talking to our county leadership and Mr. Huckleberry and community members about gun sales in Pima County. And so, we've asked to have information released to the community. So everyone is aware of what I know, because I think that that's the only way. It's from a position where everyone has the same information that we can try to come up with some solutions together, because I think everyone has tried in order to keep our community safe. We don't want people who don't have a license and don't have any, don't have background and perhaps shouldn't be carrying weapons. So those are all things. There's so many pieces of this, but I'm wondering if there is any piece of advice that you would give to people that want to get involved in their community in general, and maybe hopefully in this effort.
Well, I can start with that.
Sure.
I think it's really important for people to be involved in their community, and you can, if you can start with, just getting on a small nonprofit, or go to the different government websites and learn how to participate as a commissioner or participate on a committee. Those are really important because that's where you build relationships, and those relationships can teach you what excites you, whatever it is, whatever you want to get involved in, and it helps you to advocate for those things much better. So that's what I would do. That's what I would recommend.
Everyone's looking for a volunteer.
Yeah,
in particular
absolutely.
now.
Absolutely.
And just because many people are still keeping a low profile, staying at home, distancing, or working remotely, does not mean that the nonprofit world is not desperate for volunteers.
Absolutely.
Does not mean that the community and all of the community services do not need help. We are only as strong as our community.
Absolutely.
And our involvement in our community.
Absolutely.
And the thing that's beautiful about Tucson, and I've done this for many careers and different issues, is that there is a great spirit of commitment and concern and interest in the community. So I encourage everyone to follow your dreams, your bliss, your whatever it might be. It could range anywhere from theater to housing to taking care of animals to plants to mission gardens to just so many different things.
Right.
I think Supervisor Grijalva here has just opened the door and opened people's eyes to what's possible. But even if you're not a resident of District 5, that doesn't mean you can't participate in this. It's open to everyone, and the more involved everyone gets in our community, the better it will be.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. I was thinking, whatever your passion is, maybe you care greatly about food insecurity in our community.
Right.
Go volunteer at the community food bank. you'll meet other people who feel passionately about the things you do, and you'll find new opportunities to plug in and be involved, to gather more information. If you care about what happens to workers in our community, call us at the Pima Area Labor Federation. Look up organizations on Facebook. Google the topic of what you care about. There's so many opportunities. There's, you care about education, you don't know where to start. Maybe there's a literacy program. Maybe you want to volunteer to read to kids at the library. Maybe there's just so many opportunities. It's one of the things I've always loved about growing up in Tucson, is that no matter what you care about, there are other people who care about it with you, and coming together to accomplishing or working towards improving that area of interest. The possibilities are endless here.
Along those lines, I think some of the things, in addition to what everyone said, which is great advice, of course, I really think about, like, what are the problems in the world you want to solve? Because I think often, especially I'm thinking of working with my own kids and with youth in our community, it gets really overwhelming to think about all the things that are wrong. And it's kind of like, what can I do? And it can be intimidating sometimes to sign up for that commission or the board. So I think that one of the things that's really important about this is to remember that there's nothing too small to do. Right? Like, sometimes it's showing up to, the park and just meeting people who are at the park. Sometimes it's finding, that problem that is important to your particular family and beginning to find a way to be an advocate for yourself and the people you care about. So that's one of the ways I try to think about it. And then I think one of the things I love about Tucson, especially when we are being our best selves, is that, we're people who are willing to listen and to find the common ground. I think it's so important to build the folks up in our community and amplify each other's work. It becomes really easy to throw stones or to only focus on what's not working. But as a parent, as a teacher, I think what we always have to focus on are our strengths. And that's something that I think is so special about Tucson. And I'd encourage anybody who wants to get involved in our community to do that as well. Focus on what you're good at, focus on what you care about, focus on the problems that matter to you, and good will always come from it.
It's my experience that it's not enough to complain about something you're not happy about. Right. You have to also be a part of the solution. And in Tucson, you can be. All you have to do is reach out and try. And it can be as simple as stuffing envelopes. It can be, you don't want to be a public speaker. That's fine. There's plenty of work to go around.
Yeah. Well, one of our committee members, Vanessa Gallego, said environment and climate resiliency intersected with each committee in so many ways. And it's so true. Thank you, Vanessa, too, for your service as part of this planning process, because I do think so many of them, education crossed over into so many, ensuring safety. They just did. And so it's worked out really well in trying to plan out how we're going to accomplish some of these things, because, we have to remind ourselves, because it's just like any other goal that you have, the day-to-day stuff still continues to come. That's always going to be there. But I was really surprised when I joined as a supervisor in January that I was looking for the strategic plan for Pima County and how District 5s would support that. And individual departments have them, but there wasn't one cohesive sort of plan that was put out there for Pima County. So I'm hoping that other supervisors will join in this process, because I do think it really helps to give you guidance to the work. You have a plan versus just like, okay, so what are we doing today? Like, I know what I'm doing for the next 3 years. Like, it's all laid out for me. And thank you all for that, because otherwise, it would be sort of like, well, what do I want to do? It isn't really. That's what I felt was so critical in this, and what every other person that served in this position before me did. It's not about the individual here. It's about the work the service that we have to do for our community, and just keep pushing that idea that we all own it together. Because if there's just one person sitting in an office trying to do stuff, Good luck. It's not happening. It's absolutely not. Dan Ekstrom also said, congratulations on the great achievement for District 5 and all Pima County as a 4-term county supervisor. This is the first time to my knowledge that a supervisor has undertaken this kind of planning effort. Keep up the strong leadership and thanks for your public service. Well, thank you, Mr. Ekstrom, Supervisor Ekstrom. He says he's a recovering politician. Recovering. Yeah. So one of the things that I thought, what is a major reflection that you have had about this process? Like when you're talking to people about it, what's something that's come up for you? I've had so many where I didn't, trying to really pinpoint like measurable outcomes it's something that we do in education, right? Like Charlene, I know it's like this, I think I learned this from like the 4 times we did it in TUSD, which was really beneficial, but because you want to say stuff like, do this thing. And it's like, well, how do we measure that we're successful? And that was the hard part for me, trying to like, how do I know that we've achieved this? And then it doesn't mean that the goal is done. It just means that we're moving towards it. I don't know that we're ever going to get there, but we're going to inch our way there. So if any of you who want to chime in on what a major reflection for you has been as a part of this process.
I'm continually amazed at the diversity of backgrounds and opinions and people that are willing to come together and work together. I was so impressed with our committee and the backgrounds and the willingness to listen to one another's experience and to benefit from it and to build on it, and to build a much more integrated set of goals and actions. And of course, in nursing, it's a big part of our world is to measure outcomes. Obviously, we do that on a minute by minute and day-to-day basis. But this is bigger than all of that, even because it's a process. And you may not realize the real fruits of this for a while, but just engaging in the process has been really remarkable. And I applaud you for that. I think it gives the community hope, it gives them purpose, and it gives them inspiration. And that's what I've heard from people. They're jazzed, they're fired up.
Okay. I'm glad. I'm glad. Trish?
For me, taking away as a reflection, I tend to be a person who done strategic plans in the past, but I am a checklist person. I'm a doer, right? Very immediate outcomes, and these are the goals, we will achieve them. And so this helped me to broaden the horizons, right? Because like you said, this may be incremental progress, and I'm all about pushing for immediate progress.
Like now. Yep, I know. Me too.
Let's solve this problem and get it done, right? And so it let me see that there is still value even in the incremental progress. And even as so maybe we don't immediately sculpt the marble, but maybe we shape the clay. Yeah. Right? And we still get to that place of beauty and we still inspire and we still create, but it's not always maybe with the chisel. It can be the molding and the sculpting. And again, like has been said so many times, but I am so thrilled that you chose this path for D5 to include so much of the community and ask for people's input beyond the traditional access methods, right? The traditional voices that are heard and listened to. You really went outside of that to find people from so many different walks of life, to give them that access. And you intentionally went about it to demonstrate equity and access. And so that also was something to reflect upon, that's an incredible thing to see. So.
I heard it repeatedly, like, make sure that there are different voices. So after every meeting, we would send out like, how did it go? Who should be at the table? And then we'd invite those people like, okay, so this person is missing. And, I know that not everyone was able to attend every session, but we did get input from everyone, even if they were just able to look at what we had so far and say, I don't really like this word. And it was always fascinating to me is you'd all go off into these committees and I'd sit here kind of talking with Elvira, like, what do you think's happening? Because I try to pop into different committees, and then instead of talking to each other, it was sort of like, well, Adelita, this is what I think you should do. And it's like, no, you guys have to talk to each other. So I stopped popping in, but it was fascinating to see how much work was done in such a short period of time with so many different people sort of like they're kind of authoring. It was really it was really impressive, the work that was done. Like, we could have never done it here by ourselves. So I was just amazed. After every session, from the first version of what this was going to look like to what we ended up with was completely different. And I love that, because if it was just me writing it, it would have looked totally different.
Your staff also gets a big gold star in my book. I was very impressed.
Yeah, they do. We had Nicholas and Samantha and Keith and Elvira and Arlette, who was in the process for the mission and the discussion for the mission and vision. I've been very fortunate to have people that have a lot of differing opinions, which is great. I love it. Betty, did you want to reflect?
Add to the reflections. I think looking back I go back to that very first meeting where we all came together, our committee came together, and we were like, well, we need to do this and we need to do that, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, we kind of had to sit back and reflect, right, on what is it that we can do? Yes, these things should be done, but we can only control what we can control, right?
Yeah.
Because so many things are at the state level.
Right.
So many other things are at the federal level. And so what is it that D5 can do? And so we had to really take a step back and we all have our own agendas, right? I've always said this, it doesn't matter where you go, you have your own agenda, and that's okay. I've always said it's okay to have your own agenda as long as it's for the greater good of everyone, and everyone has a voice, and everyone's agenda can be heard, right? And so I think that was what was accomplished here. We all know where our passions are. And so we had to learn and just, look at what everyone's passion was, and then look at realistically what can be done at the county level, and then, what can be done at the state level. It doesn't mean that we stop there, right? Because the county has lobbyists and they can do other things at the state level, but we have to start with what we can do.
And that's the hard part. Like, education came back and said full funding for K-12. I'm like, yes, but we can't do it. It's like, we can advocate. If you advocate, I will do it. I've been doing it. Like, we need kindergarten. I'm like, yes, full day kindergarten, paid for by the state. We don't have it and haven't had it. Gosh.
It's a long time.
Over 2 decades. Yeah. So we only have like a few minutes left. But what I wanted to do, like just our last little parting thought, is really quickly, if you can talk about what got you involved in the work that you're currently doing in our community. And because I'm so inspired by each of you, and I think that people that are listening in, especially those people that are like, well, I'm not sure how to get involved. We talked about what you should do, but what was the catalyst that got you involved in your community? And I'll go ahead and start with Charlene.
I think I've always been somebody who believes in solving problems. I think I grew up in a really big family. I have 25 cousins, and, we all kind of grew up, we joke, into like a pack.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And I'm the oldest one, so I'm used to being bossy. But I think that one of the things that brought me to what I'm doing currently, I was a teacher for 24 years, and I really enjoyed doing that work and working with young folks. But I think over the last 5 years, one of the things that really shifted for me was really thinking about the fact that representation in government matters to me. And as I shifted more and more of my work to working to elect women of color into office, it became more and more localized. I began to really understand that the things that impact our lives every single day happen at every level of government, but especially locally. So that really drove my passion. I think it was just, again, showing up, and you begin to get involved and you kind of get the itch, and then you start doing some things, and then you're doing more things, and then you're getting people involved. And, that's really the work that drives me. And really understanding we have a diversity of opinions, which was totally inspiring about this experience. But we have to work together to do the things that matter for our families.
Absolutely. Christina.
Well, I had been very involved organizing against the Vietnam War when I met your dad years ago, many lifetimes ago. I had been very involved in doing historical things. I was the producer for the Finale for La Revoltosa for the Tucson 200 committee. And I was, so I've done a lot of different things. But when I was involved locally with my neighborhood, because people were dying, children were dying, high schoolers were dying up on the Northwest side. I've lived all over the valley. So, I mean, I'm not, believe me, I've lived all over the valley. But kids were dying up in my neighborhood, and they were kids that were friends of mine's kids. And I began to get involved in that because in the 70s, there were a lot of land use decisions that had been made with zoning, entitlements, et cetera, but there had been no commensurate infrastructure to accommodate that. And so we had grade F failing roadways, and kids were dying. And I began to be interested in land use. And I became involved as an observer with the comprehensive plan process in 1992. And then things began to evolve with the environmental issues with the listing of the pygmy owl up in the Northwest. And so over time, I just became more and more involved. And I'm a student, I'm a researcher. So anything I do, I'm always learning and studying and getting the benefit. And I was taken under the wing of some extraordinary scientists, and they thought maybe I was educable, and so they would help train me.
Nice.
And so I started off in a whole new direction. This is why I know it's doable. Anybody can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's great. Betty.
Wow. I have to think about how I got involved in housing. I started my career in banking, in retail banking. So I was there for a long time, 17 years. And then the last couple of years in retail banking, I got involved in community lending, and I just loved it. I loved being able to get, to be a part of helping people get into housing. It was just something that that became such a passion for me, and I went into community lending, and then decided to go from the private to the public when I went to the county, and used all my skills that I learned in the private sector to improve the public sector, and we did some really good work, and I don't know, it's just, to me, housing is just so important, having a home, having regardless, as I said before. So I think that's how it started. But I'm also very much into preservation, historic preservation, cultural heritage. Those are things that I'm very passionate about as well. And to me, preservation is also part of housing. It's also part of heritage. So those are all things that are important to me, and continue.
And thank you, Trish.
So, I mean, for me, I had to think about this a little bit. I think it's my connection to the community. My family owned small businesses here, restaurants. My grandmother was a school teacher in TUSD for her entire career. And so I worked for a company for about 26 years, I guess now, that had over 1,000 employees in our community. And I watched that go from a career where people could provide for their families and do well and have that stability, to this company whittling away at their pay and their benefits, and destabilizing all of those families, right? And to a degree that I was watching people lose their homes.
Yeah.
I was watching people become economic migrants and relocating to other states and leaving their families behind. And I have to say, your dad was a big supporter of ours to try to keep those jobs here. And that made me say, you know what, that's not okay. It's not okay for corporations to exploit the work of our community and to leave this wreckage in their wake, right? Because that's still for all of us as a community to pick up those pieces and help these people put everything back together. And so that became really important to me. I love this city. I love Southern Arizona, Pima County with a red hot passion that sometimes gets me into trouble. But it's personal, right? When people hurt our community, it's personal, boy. And I think that's something I've learned because of the people in our community, because they love and care about it in that way.
Well, I want to thank you all for loving and caring about our community and for making such positive change in our community. You all inspire me. And I want to thank you for all of your service and for everybody who's listening in and dedicated time and energy to this. So we've shared some of the goals laid out in the strategic plan. This is where I need your help. We don't want all this wonderful work to sit on a shelf or sit on our website. This is a living document with goals that we're held accountable to by you. And so if you're able to access the plans, volunteer opportunities, and learn more about our process on our website at adelita.grijalva.com, and then you can do the / Somos D5. We will be hosting quarterly D5 plan live updates. And this is with this first one being the first one will be January 2022, as well as recruiting volunteers to help us with the plan goals. Please sign up at our website, which is in the comments, and add any comments here. Thank you so much, ladies, for all of your time. The hour went by. We're over.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you so much for your time.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.